Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? All right, cool. Before we get started, I'd like a show of hands. How many people here have ever attended a networking event? Place where you go walk into a room full of people that you don't know. This counts as a networking event, yes. All right, can somebody tell me about your experiences? How was it? What about you? I saw you raise your hand. Hard to get started. Okay, anybody else? What are your experiences when you first walk into an event? All right. What?
It's intimidating.
Intimidating. I often hear awkward because you're walking into all these people you don't know. And so I'm here to help you basically learn how to handle those sorts of events, how to use those events to grow a professional network, and why that's important for you to do. A little bit about me. I'm Cassandra Faris. I am the talent manager at Improving Enterprises. We're a software development consulting company located here in Columbus. I'm also president of a Microsoft-focused conference called Dog Food. That happens in October, little sales pitch. Our call for speakers will be opening here in the next month or so. And for fun, I'm into board games, I'm into soccer, and I like to travel as much as I can get away with. So I know a lot of times we think that networking is something that is for sales and for management and for recruiting and for all of those non-technical people that we work with. But what we may not always realize is that developers also can use a network to help them benefit their careers, to help them grow jobs. So I want to tell you a couple stories about people who've used their network to grow their careers. There was Amanda, and Amanda was working in desktop support but started to take an interest in coding. So she started teaching herself some code and started then attending some user groups so she could meet other people who were doing some coding. Did this for about a year and a half, learned some things, met some people, and one day found out that somebody she knew from the .NET meetup group was hiring for his company. So she interviewed for the job and got a job as an apprentice-level developer. There was also Dave. Dave's situation is pretty similar to something we can relate to. He'd found his programming job on a job board, wasn't growing a whole lot. He'd been there about a year and a half, was kind of bored, not feeling real connected to his company, but he was still keeping himself active in the community and knew people through conferences and events. And so one day when he was venting this to one of his friend told him that his company was hired, referred him into the company, and Dave's now working at a really good company and growing. So the point that I'm making is that growing a network is something that can benefit all technical professionals. When you're looking for a new job, it just reduces some of the risks involved in looking for a job because you know what you're going into and you know the people that are referring you into the job. It also gives you better visibility into the companies and the people that you would be working with. So there are a lot of definitions of networking, but they kind of all share some common characteristics. Networking is interactive. It is an interactive exchange of information for two people, and networking, especially professional networking, is based on professional common interests. The purpose of networking is to grow and develop relationships and ultimately to create professional opportunities. Why is it important? It's important because when you're in a network, you can provide assistance. Sometimes this is the form of somebody has a business problem that you can solve. Or you can maybe give somebody sales leads, or somebody in your network needs help, needs volunteers to help run a conference. Those are all sorts of assistance that a network can provide. Networking establishes credibility. As you start showing up to more professional events, people start taking you more seriously as a professional and think that you're somebody that knows what you're talking about. Networking is good for learning. This is something that not all industries have, but in our industry, we're lucky that so many of our networking events overlap with learning events. And the thing we're going to focus on today is that networking is important for career growth, it's important for job leads, for referrals for new team members, and it winds up scoring you a few free lunches. So JobVite is an applicant tracking and social recruiting company. In 2012, they conducted a survey tracking kind of source of basically candidate application and hiring data by source to affect how it affected hiring rates and employee longevity. And what they found is that only 7% of people who applied from jobs were referred into their companies, but of that 7% who applied for jobs, 40% were hired. You compare that to the 20% of people who found their jobs on career sites and what their hiring rates are like. So why are referrals so effective? Why do we who hire people like referrals? We like referrals because we know that if you're a good person, you're going to refer good people into your company. We know that the people that you're referring are probably a good fit for the company as well. And so we just know that we're going to make better hires that way. The other nice thing the same survey found is that referrals tend to stay at their jobs longer. In our industry, it's not uncommon for people to move around every 2 years or so. People who are referred into their companies are almost 50% likely to stay at their company for over 3 years. This is because there's just a lot less unknown variables. People who are referred into the company know the person who gave them the lead. They get more honest feedback on the opportunity, so you'll get some insider information about the company that you might not otherwise get. And you'll know about the company culture ahead of time. Some of those kind of intricacies of the company that don't come out in an HR interview come out when you have a friend who works in the company. So meeting people and networking is good for your career. How does it work? Well, it's a process. It's a process that consists of growing a network by attending events and meeting people at events, knowing how to handle networking events, and then how to maintain your network and follow up, and that's what yields the opportunities. Meeting new people is not hard to do. You meet new people every day at school, you're dropping your kids off at school, or you're in line at Starbucks, or wherever. You're always meeting new people. We meet new people through our friends and through our coworkers as well. But to meet people to network with, you need to target that a little bit more. You need to attend events where you'll meet people that you have professional interests in common with. My suggestion, especially as you're starting out networking, is that you start with technical events. So this is a screenshot from the dog food conference, or a picture that was taken at dog food conference, which is the technical event. The nice thing about going into that type of event is that you'll have something that you're already familiar with. You're familiar with the material. You are going to SQL Saturday, but you're already familiar with SQL Server. So there's something that you know, that you're interested in, and also that you're going to learn about. When you're choosing what technical events to attend or what sessions to attend, I always suggest that you mix it up a little bit. Start with things that you work with in daily life. So if your company's implementing Angular, check out the AngularJS user group. But also choose things that you might find interesting. So don't think a whole lot of people are doing Internet of Things development, but maybe check out an Internet of Things session sort of thing. Either way, networking events will be a little bit more comfortable. When I first started out working in this industry, I wanted to learn more about the technologies that people were working with. So I started just by asking friends, hey, what events do you attend? My friends told me about those events, invited me to them, and that kind of started getting me into the world of what happens in our tech community. Also, Google and Meetup are good places to find events. You can use social media connections. Somebody you follow on Twitter might be tweeting about an event they're going to. Eventbrite, Reddit, LinkedIn, all can be places to find events as well. Ultimately, you just have to pick something and show up. That said, you're also going to want to get into some non-technical events. And this quote up here is basically focused on career networking, and it's about joining clubs and why you should do that as far as helping you build a network. So it says, don't just join clubs for the sake of meeting people for networking. People see right through your insincerity. Join clubs that do things you're genuinely interested in. You already have at least one thing in common with everyone else, and you'll have a much better chance of developing a relationship that one day could lead to a job you'll attend than at a random networking event. New people are always visiting and joining clubs. There are plenty of clubs to join, and your network's never going to get stale. Best of all, you're going to have fun, so building a network isn't like drudgery. So why is it important to do this kind of stuff? Long-term career growth. Someday you might want to get out of development, or maybe you're interested in finding a startup to work with. Those sorts of opportunities come up more frequently if you're in a non-technical situation. Also, it just helps your connections be stronger. Somebody that you connect with technically, but also have something personally that you're interested in, maybe you're both play the same video games, that makes your relationship stronger, and that makes each other more inclined to help each other out. So, what are some suggestions for other networking groups? You can do sports teams, There's nonprofits, there's volunteer organizations, things that are around hobbies. I know there's a lot of locally board game meetups. Those tend to have some overlap with professional. So just kind of find some groups, get out there and meet people. So once you've signed up for an event and decided which one you're going to go to, you might want to figure out how to get ready for that. If you do some preparation ahead of time, it's going to make it a little bit easier. So the first thing that I suggest is that you have a goal. And the goal can be a simple thing. It can be, walking into Stir Trek today, I would like to talk to 3 new people. Or it could be, I'd like to talk to one person who's not a developer. That kind of helps you have a focus and a purpose when you go in so you don't walk in feeling completely lost. Do some preparation and some research ahead of time. This is a screenshot of the local meetup site. Shows the next meetup I'm going to, but what's nice is you can go on Meetup and see who else is attending a networking group. So you can see if there are people that you might want to meet, and alternatively, if everybody seems to be an insurance salesman that's going into that meetup, maybe skip that one and find another one, unless you want to network with insurance salesmen. So it's nice to do some research. It can give you some insight on the value of the event ahead of time. Twitter, I cannot say it enough. I love Twitter. Before I go to an event, I always look up the Twitter hashtag. I use a tool called Hootsuite to manage my Twitter accounts, and I'll make a stream to follow the hashtag so I can see what people are saying about it. And I'll tweet about events before and during I go. Recently I was going to the Chamber of Commerce breakfast, and I didn't know anybody in that group that was going. So I sent a tweet ahead of time with, hey, who will I see at Chamber of Commerce breakfast, hashtag. Someone had responded to me about that, and so it was nice because when I walked in the room, then I knew somebody to look for and seek out, and that started my first conversation of the day. Twitter is also a great way to connect with people during events. You can share your insights, see what other people are saying, kind of engage in a conversation. And then if you've been tweeting with somebody online, then that can start a conversation online. Like, hey, I know we were just tweeting about this topic. Let's talk about it a little bit more. So Twitter is a very, very powerful tool, both before and during events. Finally, you're going to want to have a business card. So you have a couple options with business cards. You can do a personal business card or a professional one. The kind of pros and cons are that with a professional business card, a lot of developers, we don't get business cards. And your contact information obviously belongs to your employer. So if that's the case, or you just don't get a business card, make a personal one. It just needs to have your name, what you do, email address, and maybe your blog or your Twitter handle. Make sure that you get them printed online professionally, and make sure that you have them with you. You're not going to use the business card a whole lot, but it's a really important follow-up tool. Every time I leave an event, I have a handful of business cards. I'll actually sometimes write notes on the back of them so I can remember what I talked to about somebody. I'll do my follow-up actions, and the business cards go in a box, and I usually don't look at them again, to be honest, but they're a good tool for remembering things. So I know not everybody is naturally inclined to be outgoing, but it's a skill that you can build, and it's something that can be easier over time. Having the right mindset is the biggest thing you can do to help. So going into your networking event, go in and be yourself. Don't go in pretending to be a salesperson if you're not a salesperson. Don't go in being who you think your boss expects you to be. Go in being who you actually are. Then you won't be trying to play a part while you're doing everything else. You want to be confident. And this isn't saying to be cocky or arrogant, but you do want to remember that modesty is not a career-enhancing trait. And what that means is that you have something that's useful and valuable to contribute to people's conversations. So remind yourself of that before you go in. Instead of saying, oh, I'm not as smart as everybody in this room, remind yourself of what you are good at. Oh, I'm really awesome at test engineering, so I'm going into a test engineering meetup. I can tell people about this. Finally, you want to be energetic. This isn't saying you need to be hyper. You don't have to get up and jump all around, though. If you are hyper, great. You just want to remember that the energy that you are projecting affects your interactions with people. So if you're one of these people who's standing arms crossed, looking down at your feet, kind of closed and mumbling, people aren't going to feel real comfortable talking with you, and they're not going to remember that action positively, and they're not going to want to talk with you in the future. So if you're kind of open, talking to people, smiling, energetic, that's the energy they'll take away from a conversation, and that's going to make them feel more positive about it. And a good tip for kind of keeping your energy level up at events is just to select events at days and times when you're at your best. So if you're not a morning person, don't go to the 7 a.m. breakfast event. Find something else to go to. I personally use that tip all the time because I'm not a morning person. Same thing if you're not into happy hours, don't go to happy hours. Find another meetup. So there's a book out there called 11 Laws of Likability. And the book focuses on the value of forming good relationships to advance yourself and your career. And in this book, the author lays out kind of the process of a conversation at a networking event. And she breaks it down into 4 different parts. So when you're having a conversation, you have your introduction, your initiation, continuation, and ending. Introduction's easy. Some people do like to practice this. They call it an elevator pitch or whatever, but it's basically who you are and what you do. So hi, I'm Cassandra Faris, Talent Manager at Improving Enterprises. Bam, that's your intro, easy enough. Then you have to initiate a conversation. Initiation can be a little bit scary, but there are a lot of tricks you can do to get conversations going. First thing to remember is that once you get people started, they love to talk about themselves. So, some conversation starters. Compliments, questions. This is a perfect example. So somebody's wearing a Groot shirt that you love. You say, hey, that's a great Groot shirt, and then that starts a conversation about, I don't know, your favorite people in the Marvel universe. Questions are also a really good way to start. So it can even be things like, what do you do for a living? That's an easy one. Where are you from? How did you hear about this conference? All these kind of compliments and questions get conversations started and help you find things that you have in common. Who do you go up to when you walk into an event? Find somebody who's standing alone. Chances are that person's hoping and praying somebody comes up to them and talks to them. So go up to the person, smile, introduce yourself, and ask where they're from. Just start a conversation. And kind of my pro tip for this, when you're standing in line, it's a perfect place to start a conversation with a stranger. I was at a conference earlier this week down in Louisville, and I used this tip really well. I was in a long registration line, started talking with the person who was standing behind me, found out he was also speaking, attending the same couple workshops I was attending. So we spent the day together, had lunch together. We've talked a couple times since then. And it was all because I looked up from my phone for 5 minutes to talk to somebody in real life while I waited in line. So initiating conversations can be difficult. It can be scary. So I want to help you kind of learn how to make it less scary. You might be a little bit nervous going into a conversation because you're shy, you're afraid the person's going to reject you, or you're just not experienced. So some tips that you can do to kind of help yourself be more comfortable are consider these options. So look at the size of the group. If you don't like big crowded events, don't go to the big crowded networking group. Look at the purpose of the group. Choose something that you have an interest in. Don't go to a group that you feel like you should be at if you're not interested in that. Consider the location. If you're not comfortable in bars or you're not comfortable at outdoor events, don't go to events that are held in those venues. Use the buddy system. Basically invite a friend or a coworker. This has actually worked really, really well for me. Early on, I'd been doing this technology thing for, a month or so. A friend of mine invited me to an IT Martini event. The nice thing about that is I had a friend who already knew people in the room, so he could introduce me to people. He introduced me to a person. We strike up a conversation. Come to find out that the guy was looking for a SQL Server developer. A few months later, I met an awesome SQL Server developer who then started working for the guy I met at the IT Martini. So that was kind of the benefit of having a friend there. I wouldn't have probably talked to that guy otherwise. And finally, just practice. The more you do this, the easier it gets. So you've initiated your conversation. You've introduced yourself. Excuse me. So the next thing that you want to do is continue the conversation. When you're making a conversation flow, curiosity is going to be your biggest friend. Basically, you're going to ask questions. The questions that you ask will help people find commonalities. As people find more commonalities with you, they become more at ease with you, they talk to you more, and you start to form kind of more long-lasting and effective relationships. Basically, people trust people that they can relate to. Kind of question asking 101, don't ask yes and no questions. Kills the conversation if you say, are you a developer? Yes. Conversation's over. Say, what type of developer are you? Or what do you do? Any open-ended questions, things that start with how, what, where, why, are good conversation starters. There's also the generic personal questions that we all default to. What do you think about this weather? What do you do? Where are you from? Those are good conversation starters. Finally, you can ask somebody's opinion, but this is something I suggest you use carefully because you don't want to hear somebody's opinion on something you don't actually want to discuss. All right, it's great to be curious. It's great to talk. You also have to listen. Listening is an active activity. It is not passive. And to borrow from 11 Laws of Likability again, the author lays out 3 different types of listening. Listening in is when basically you relate what other people are saying to your experiences. So, oh, I also have a corgi. Oh, I also am a .NET programmer. Great, but elaborate on that by listening out. So you relate what they've said to something that you know to facilitate a conversation. I also have a corgi. Why do you think they're the best dogs ever? I'm also a .NET programmer. What got you started in the tech stack? That makes a conversation flow. And finally, there's just kind of intuitive listening, paying attention to body language and what is being said and not said. So this happens all the time. You're talking to somebody you met, there's that weird silence, and you're both looking around. There's a couple tricks that you can use to get through that. You can do what's called curtailing the conversation. And basically, that's where you kind of change the focus. So you invite somebody else into the conversation, maybe somebody that's walking by. If you're lucky, it's somebody you know that you can invite in. Or you can change kind of your scenery or activity. So a classic example of this is, hey, I'm going to go grab a snack. Do you want to come with me? Or go check out this vendor exhibit. Sometimes that act of walking around with somebody helps reignite the conversation. If it's time for the conversation to end, that's fine. When you end a conversation, you want to make sure that you leave people feeling good. So end with a nice to meet you. If they gave you some useful information, say thank you. If there was a conversational point that you owe them a follow-up on, say thank you. I'll send you that list of upcoming tech conferences or whatever the example is. That's when I use a fair bit when I get talk to people about that. If you have a follow-up opportunity already kind of building while you end that conversation, that'll make your follow-up easier. Okay, so some kind of edge cases aside, you don't usually leave an event with an awesome new job lead or a great new sales lead or whatever it is that you're looking for. Those kind of hallway conversations and talks that you have with people are your groundwork for forming your network. But you need to follow up because it's the follow-up that actually makes the whole process go better. So there are a lot of ways to follow up after an event, and this is the next few days after this event, I'll do all of these things. Some people, it's easy just a nice to meet you tweet. You know, hey, it was nice to meet you at whatever event, and follow them. There is the LinkedIn connection request. I know we all have a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but send a LinkedIn connection request with a note. Hey, it was great to meet you at Stir Trek. Customize that connection request. You can email follow-up on an interesting conversational point. This is one I use a fair bit as well as I'm talking to people about conferences. It comes up, I'll email them a list of conferences, or maybe I read an article about something that came up in a topic, I'll share that article. Those are all good ways to follow up. And finally, invite them to coffee, lunch, happy hour, another networking event. If it was somebody that you really enjoyed talking to and would like to talk to more, invite them out for coffee or lunch. People usually don't turn that down, especially if you're buying. These follow-up actions are actually the same as your network maintenance actions. So social media is a great way to supplement and kind of augment your relationship. Not everybody, we don't have endless hours to go have coffee and lunch with everybody that we meet at events. But you can always take some time to scroll through your Twitter feed, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, whatever, and see what people are up to. Facebook is, I was really hesitant initially about using Facebook and connecting with people I know professionally, but I found that it actually works well to find out other things that you might have in common with people that might not come out in a conversation. So you might find out that you and that guy in the hallway are both Cub Scout leaders or both training for a half marathon. So you can choose whether or not to use Facebook. You can also implement kind of privacy filters on Facebook if you'd like. LinkedIn, kind of the classic professional networking site. Pro tip on LinkedIn, when you make your account, go in and fix your email settings. That's kind of one of the biggest complaints I hear about LinkedIn is how much spam email they send. You can shut off all those settings, so you don't get an email for everything that happens on LinkedIn. The only LinkedIn emails that actually come to my inbox are new connection requests and private messages that people send. So that's a good tool. You also can subscribe to these LinkedIn status updates that come in once a week, and they'll show things like who joined a new company, who got a promotion, who's celebrating a work anniversary. Those can actually be really good job lead updates, because if you see that your friend got a job at this really cool new company, you can ask them what that company's like or if they're hiring. Twitter is my favorite. It just is. I love it. It's open. You can talk to anybody. The big thing with Twitter is just to treat it like any other conversation. It's, yeah, a limited conversation, but you can banter back and forth with people, joke, talk, whatever, ask questions. Really, really good tool. And then some of the more content-driven and technical-specific websites also have a social component. So Stack Overflow or GitHub, where you can kind of collaborate on projects. So those are also maybe some good options to check out. Social media best practices. You want to, first of all, be intentional. Think about what you're sharing and think about why you're sharing it. We all know those people who overshare, you hear just personal details you don't want to hear. Be intentional, think about what you're sharing. Don't be a robot. We also all have seen those Twitter accounts that all they do is untap check-ins or Xbox achievements. That's fine, share some of that stuff, but mix it up. So maybe a link to one of your Instagrams, and then tweet about an event that you're at, and then a compliment of somebody's picture of their cat, whatever. Just mix it up so that you look like a person and not like you're a robot. Limit negativity. This is a big one. You don't want to be that person who's always negative, having the worst day ever. You don't want to be public complainer all the time. And this actually happened several years ago now. Someone applied for a job, and the first thing I did when I got the resume was Googled it and found his Twitter handle. Twitter handle was the same as his name. His tweets were nothing but a series of him complaining about his current employer, about his job, about how much he was hating life there. His boss was an idiot, on and on and on for probably 10 or 12 tweets. That guy did not get a call for an interview. And finally, if you're going to weigh in on controversial topics, do so carefully. When people start getting politics, religion, whatever, be really careful if you're going to share that stuff on social media, because we all know how quickly internet arguments go downhill. All right, so it's great. You can be online behind your computer, and that's cool, but you need to get out as well. So all that online social networking is a supplement, not a replacement for in-person networking. So you want to meet with people in person. Like I said earlier, they don't usually turn down an invite for coffee or lunch. And what you can do a lot of times is, hey, do you want to grab coffee next month? If you push it out a few weeks, it also seems less intimidating to the other person to commit, and their schedule's usually a little bit more free. The nice thing about these in-person conversations is that you have more in-depth kind of chance to get to know each other, so you'll learn things about each other that might not come out otherwise. You might find out that somebody's really passionate about healthcare that you wouldn't have found out about otherwise, and so then 3 months from now you hear about a healthcare startup where you can connect those people with one another. Basically, the better you get to know other people, the better you and the other person can help each other out. Some pro tips on professional relationships. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes work, and we're talking sometimes years worth of work, but it's worth it. So you need to be patient. You need to remember that it's not all about work. Yes, we are networking professionally, but there's nothing wrong with a shared interest in board games or soccer games or craft beer or whatever your hobbies are. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of overlap there. Also things like, that person you met at the conference is training for a half marathon. Congratulate them on finishing the half marathon. All that kind of stuff helps deepen those relationships. Scheduling is your best friend when it comes to networking. I always feel really weird about this, especially with my college friends. But I found that if I don't actually schedule on my calendar lunches, coffees, happy hours, I never see those people. We're all busy, we all have a million things to do, so you need to take some time and schedule stuff. Helping others is a great big one. So if somebody in your network needs help and you can help them, do it. Somebody in your network is looking for a lead architect and you know a lead architect, introduce those people. or you are a lead architect, offer to interview for the job. If you can't help that person but know somebody who can, get their permission to be introduced to one another and introduce one another. Happened to me, a friend of mine was looking for a job down in Austin, Texas. Well, I recruit here in Columbus, so that wasn't really going to work. But I did know a recruiter down in Austin, so I checked with him, made sure he was cool with the intro, and then I introduced him to the recruiter in Austin, and now he's interviewing for jobs. So it's kind of another way that you can help people. And don't be afraid to ask for help. If, like I said earlier, if somebody in your network works for a company that you'd really like to work for, there's nothing wrong with asking about company details and hiring. Okay, so now it is time to practice networking. I need everybody to stand up and pair up with the closest stranger. Up. All right. I need you to find out the other person's name, their job, their hobby, and why they came to Stir Trek. Going to give you about 4 minutes to do this. When the timer goes off, we'll go to the next step. I would like to get away from here, but... Hey, how are you?
I was next to 3 people I knew, so that made it hard.
Hey. Well, there we go. that actually going? Yeah. All right. We ready? All right, step 3. You and your partner pair up with the other pair closest to you. Introduce yourselves to one another. Another 5 or 6 minutes to do this.
All right. Make it easy. How you doing? Hey, my name's Steve. James. James.
All right, time's up. Everybody sit back down. And I promise I'll let you continue your conversations in a couple more minutes. All right, so covered a lot of information. I just kind of want to put it all together for you. Basically, you need to spend the time and the effort into proactive networking activities. You need to attend events, you need to meet people, you need to stay in touch with those people. The more you do this and the more you practice, the easier it'll get. Why do you need to do this? You need to do this because building a network and finding new teammates is risky. We saw earlier only 14% of people who find their jobs on job boards stay for more than 3 years. You need to build a network because through your network, you're going to get better insight into your job opportunities and into the companies you'll be working with. And finally, you need to build a network because then you'll be making work a lot more fun because you'll be working with people that you actually like to work with. So, any questions? No questions. All right. Well, that's my dog, that's me, my contact information. I'm happy to stick around and chat, and thank you all for coming.